My name is Margaret Cole. I'm 70 years old, and last month my only son tried to have me declared legally incompetent so he could protect my money. He thought I was a forgetful old woman with a tiny pension and a paid-off house. He didn't know I secretly owned the controlling stake in the company that paid his six-figure salary. The night my lawyer called and said, "Maggie, don't go to your son's house. They've already hired a doctor to prove you're insane." I felt something inside me snap, not from fear, but from a cold, steady anger. By the time this was over, my son would lose everything he tried to steal, and he'd do it in front of the very people he'd been lying to for years. Before I tell you how I turned their trap into their downfall, I want to know something from you. From which city and country are you watching this? Drop it in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you believe that underestimating an elder can be the most expensive mistake anyone makes, please hit like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you don't miss more stories like this. Now let me take you back to the Sunday evening my son invited me over for family dinner and forgot that the woman who raised him also designed bridges for a living. We see weak spots for a living, and we know exactly how to make the whole thing collapse. It was 4:42 p.m. on a windy Sunday in Aurora, Colorado, when my entire life stopped feeling like my own. I was standing in my small kitchen, turning a pot of chili on the stove, humming to myself. My house isn't much, a two-bedroom ranch at the edge of a faded neighborhood with cracked sidewalks and neighbors who still wave from their porches. My son, Ethan, calls it quaint when he's in a generous mood and embarrassing when he's had too much to drink. My phone buzzed on the counter. I expected it to be Ethan reminding me to bring the cornbread I'd promised. Instead, I saw the name Klein and Associates, my lawyer's office, on a Sunday. I frowned and picked up. "Hello?" "Maggie, it's Ruth," my attorney said, with no greeting and no warmth. Her voice was tight enough to snap. "Where are you right now?" "At home. I'm leaving for Ethan's in about 15 minutes. Is everything all right?" "No," she said. "Whatever you do, do not go to your son's house tonight." I laughed softly, because what else do you do when your lawyer talks like a TV show? "Ruth, it's just dinner. He's probably going to guilt me about not moving into one of those assisted living places again." I heard papers rustling on her end, faster than usual. "Maggie, my paralegal just got an automatic alert from the county court. Ethan and his wife filed an emergency petition this morning." A cold spot opened in my chest. "For what?" I asked, though I already knew the answer wasn't good. "Emergency guardianship," she said. "Over you." The word felt wrong in my ears. Guardianship. As if I were a child, not the woman who'd held up bridges and traffic systems for 40 years. "On what grounds?" I forced out. "The usual boilerplate garbage," Ruth said bitterly. "Alleged cognitive decline, unsafe living conditions, vulnerability to financial scams. And here's the key line. Evidence that the respondent is rapidly dissipating her remaining assets in an irrational manner." I looked around my little kitchen, the cheap stove I'd had repaired 3 times, the same laminate countertops my late husband and I installed ourselves in 1987, the canned chili I'd bought on sale with coupons. "Dissipating assets?" I repeated. "My wildest purchase this month was a new pair of orthopedic sneakers." "They don't know that, and they don't care," Ruth said. "They're gambling you're a typical retiree with a few $100,000 tucked away. They've created a fake emergency so a judge will hand them control before anyone blinks." My heart thudded, slow and heavy. Ethan. My boy who used to bring me dandelion bouquets. The one I drove to science fairs and school plays. the one who now lived in a custom-built house on a hill, paid for by a salary he thought came from faceless investors. "Ruth," I said slowly, "is there anything in the petition about tonight?" "Yes," she said grimly. "They mention a concerned specialist who will be present at your residence for informal evaluation. They've hired a neurologist, Dr. Halperin, to observe your confusion at tonight's dinner, and they'll take his report to court first thing Tuesday morning." I could see it all as clearly as one of my old blueprints. The phony concern, the leading questions, and the scribbling on a legal pad while I pretend not to understand the date. Ruth took a breath. "We can fight this. I'll file an objection. Get statements from your primary care, your neighbors." "No," I said quietly, feeling something sharp and clean form inside me. "No?" She sounded almost offended. "Maggie, this is serious. They are trying to legally erase your autonomy." "I know exactly how serious it is," I said. "They've built a story. They've cast their roles. They hired their expert." "And?" she pressed. "And it would be very rude," I said, "if I didn't show up and give them the performance of a lifetime." There was a long silence on the line. "Maggie," Ruth said slowly, "what are you planning?" I turned off the stove, untied my apron, and walked to the little hallway mirror. A tired woman with thinning gray hair met my eyes. My hands were steady. My mind was sharp. And I was done pretending to be smaller than I was. "I'm going to dinner," I said. "Let them think I'm weak. Let them underestimate me. Just be ready, Ruth. Because when I'm done acting confused, I'm going to need you to help me remind them exactly who they're dealing with." And with that, I put on my old wool coat, grabbed the cornbread, and stepped out into the cold Colorado air, straight toward the trap my own son had set for me. To understand why my son was desperate enough to try to steal my life, you need to know what he thought I was, and what I actually am. On paper, I'm boring. I'm a retired civil engineer who spent most of my career with the Colorado Department of Transportation. I designed bridges, overpasses, and traffic flow systems that most drivers never think about. I married my college sweetheart, a high school history teacher named Tom, and we bought that little ranch house when Ethan was 3. Ethan grew up on the smell of coffee and blueprints. I'd come home with rolls of paper under my arm, and he'd unroll them on the living room floor, driving toy cars along the lines of future highways. "You built this?" he'd ask, eyes huge. "Not alone," I'd say. "But I helped make sure it doesn't fall down when people drive on it." Tom used to say engineering was the perfect job for me because I hated 2 things: chaos and arrogance. Bridges don't care how rich you are. Gravity treats everyone the same. You respect the forces at work, or they take you down. We weren't rich, but we were steady. We paid off the house slowly. We took one modest vacation a year, usually camping or road trips. Ethan wanted more. He hated the old station wagon, the thrift store clothes, and the way I brought a brown bag lunch to work, even when I could have afforded the cafeteria. In high school, he started gravitating toward the rich kids. Tom and I scraped and saved to send him to a decent private college in Denver. I told myself it was for his future. I didn't realize I was paying for him to start resenting where he came from. When I was 55, everything changed. By then, I'd left the DOT and joined a small engineering startup a former colleague had founded. We specialized in traffic optimization software, a system of algorithms that predicted congestion and rerouted flows in real time. I didn't write the code, but I designed the rules the code followed. It was the closest thing I'd ever made to a living, thinking thing. 2 years later, a large infrastructure tech company, Northline Systems, came knocking. They wanted our software, our contracts, and our small but very smart team. The partners were thrilled. We were all going to be comfortable, as they put it. Most of them wanted cash. I wanted control. Everyone's taking the buyout, our founder Jake said in that meeting. Maggie, are you sure you want equity instead? Most folks your age are looking at retirement, not hoping the stock goes up. I'd looked at the numbers. Northline was heavily leveraged, but their long-term contracts were solid. My algorithms weren't just useful. They were becoming the backbone of urban traffic networks. Cash disappears, I said. Equity, if you're patient, compounds. So we struck a deal. They bought out my share of the firm for a modest sum, which I used to make sure Tom and I would never worry about medical bills. And in addition, I negotiated a block of founders' equity in the form of a quiet trust. The Cole Horizons Trust is managed by an independent firm, with one beneficiary, me. I didn't tell Ethan the details, not because I didn't trust him then, but because I knew him. He was already dazzled by shiny things. I wanted him to build his own career without counting my money as his safety net. Tom and I planned to travel once he retired. We'd watch our grandkids and maybe get a little cabin up in Estes Park. Life had other plans. Tom had a heart attack 2 months before his official retirement. One minute he was packing up his classroom. The next, he was gone. Grief rearranges your brain. For months, I couldn't think about interest rates or equities. I slept in Tom's old flannel robe and sat at the kitchen table staring at our fading wedding pictures. The only things that kept me moving were habit and work. Northline grew. Then it merged. Then merged again. The Cole Horizons Trust quietly accumulated shares, split them, and rolled them into the new entity, Metro Grid Technologies, a national giant controlling traffic systems and smart infrastructure from coast to coast. By the time Ethan was in his mid-30s, working his way up in corporate finance, my little equity stake translated into something else entirely. A 52% controlling interest in Metro Grid. I knew exactly what that meant. I also knew exactly what would happen if Ethan knew. See, Ethan did well for himself, for a while. He married Brooke, a social media consultant with perfect teeth and a talent for turning everything into content. They moved from a starter condo to a house on a ridge with big windows, views of the Rockies, and a mortgage that made my stomach clench when I looked up average prices. He got a job in corporate finance, then eventually landed as chief financial officer of Metro Grid's Western operations. He thought some anonymous board back east had recruited him. He never realized his mother's trust had quietly nudged his resume to the top of the pile. I wanted him close enough to watch, far enough that he wouldn't feel owned. At first he called me every Sunday, then it was twice a month, then it was, "Sorry, Mom, we're just so busy, you know how it is, back-to-back meetings, Brooks brand partnerships, the kids' activities." What he didn't know was that every quarter, I saw the numbers he signed off on. I saw his salary, I saw his bonuses, and eventually, I saw something else. Tiny irregularities in expense accounts and small consulting fees to unfamiliar entities. Nothing big enough to scream fraud on its own, but enough that the engineer in me noticed the strain on the bridge. Still, I waited. I hoped I was wrong. I hoped my son wasn't the type of man who'd risk everything for more. Then he started making little comments at dinners. "You must be so glad you don't have to worry about money, Mom," he'd say. "State pension, paid-off house, Social Security. Simple life, simple problems." Or, "Have you ever thought about letting me look over your accounts? Just to make sure you're not getting taken advantage of. There are so many scams targeting seniors now. He said seniors like a diagnosis, not an age. I played my part. I shrugged and said, "Oh, you know me, Ethan. I never had much to begin with. Your father and I lived simply. The pension keeps the lights on. That's enough." Brooke would exchange a glance with him, a small one. But I saw it. They thought they were circling a small, wounded animal. They had no idea they were walking on the back of something much, much larger. Something that had been awake and watching for a very long time. And now, with Ruth's call and the word guardianship hanging in the air, I realized the bridge had finally reached its breaking point. Someone had decided to jump up and down on it. It takes practice to make your hands shake on command. As I drove my dented Subaru up the winding road to Ethan and Brooke's neighborhood, I focused on the muscle above my thumb, the way it twitched when I was low on sleep. I exaggerated that feeling, letting a soft tremor run through my hand. By the time I parked in front of their big glass-fronted house with the manicured lawn and the string lights already on for atmosphere, my fingers looked convincingly unsteady on the steering wheel. Ethan opened the door before I could knock. He was in a navy sweater and expensive jeans, casual but curated. His smile was wide, but his eyes went straight to the Tupperware of cornbread in my hand, like he was assessing whether I'd dropped it. "Mom, finally," he said, taking the container. We were starting to worry. "Traffic," I lied, leaning slightly on the doorframe as if I needed the support. "The lights are all so fast these days." His gaze flicked to my keys in my other hand, then back to my face. "You drove yourself," he said. "You know you can always ask us to pick you up." From the living room, Brooke's voice floated out. "Is she here? Kids, Nana's here." Her tone was a little too high, a little too bright. I stepped inside. The house was as flawless as their Instagram feed. White walls, big windows, and art that looked more like design than expression. My grandkids, Lila and Mason, ran up to me and hugged my waist. For a second, my anger cracked, and I hugged them with my real strength, not the fake frailness I was preparing. Then I saw him. A man in his 50s stood near the kitchen island. He wore a charcoal blazer over a button-down shirt, no tie. He had a small leather notebook and a pen in his hand, which he slipped into his pocket when I looked at him. "Mom," Ethan said, putting an arm around my shoulders and steering me forward. "You remember we told you one of our friends might be joining us tonight? This is Dr. Halperin. He's a neurologist. We met him at that charity gala last month." Dr. Halperin stepped forward, hand extended. "Mrs. Cole," he said smoothly, "I've heard so much about you." I let my eyes squint like I was trying to place him. Have we met?" I asked, my voice just a shade too vague. "Not yet," he said, smiling professionally. "But I'm glad we finally do." "Mom, can I take your coat?" Brooke asked, already sliding it off my shoulders before I could answer. She smelled like expensive perfume and anxiety. We sat at the table, long rustic wood under a modern chandelier. They placed me at one end, Dr. Halperin at the other, and Ethan and Brooke on either side of him like a little jury. The kids ate early and had already been shooed to the den with a movie. We made small talk about the weather, about the kids' school projects, and about the price of eggs. Then the questions began. "So, Margaret," Dr. Halperin said, voice gentle. "Ethan tells me you used to be an engineer. That must have been fascinating work." "Yes," I said, cutting my cornbread slowly. "I liked knowing that if I did my job well, strangers would get home safely. And now that you're retired," he continued, "how do you spend your time?" "Oh, you know," I said, letting my eyes wander vaguely to the window. Reading, gardening when my knees let me. I help at the library sometimes. And managing your finances, he said casually, taking a sip of wine. Do you handle all that yourself? Beside him, Ethan's fork froze just a millimeter above his plate. Brooke took a very deliberate sip of water. I let out a soft laugh. Finances, such a big word, I said. My pension comes in, the bills go out. I write checks. Sometimes the bank sends me things I don't quite understand, but I just shred them. Too much paper, you know. Dr. Halperin's pen reappeared, scratching on the paper balanced on his knee. Do you ever feel confused by dates? He asked. Or lose track of appointments? Yes, I said immediately, then let confusion wash over my face. I forget what I had for breakfast sometimes, but I remember the important days, like Sundays. Dinner with Ethan and I let my gaze flick to Brooke, then down, as if searching for her name. The silence stretched just long enough. Brooke, she supplied, her smile tight. It's okay, Margaret. Everybody forgets sometimes. She had a little episode last month, Ethan added, jumping in. She got lost on the way to the pharmacist she's been using for 20 years. She called me from a parking lot in tears. Remember, Mom? That never happened. I let my bottom lip tremble. I did? I whispered. It's all right, he said soothingly, patting my hand. It scared me, that's all. You sounded so confused. I nodded slowly, like I was accepting a reality they were offering. They fed the doctor a story about imaginary missed bills, about fictional telemarketer calls I'd fallen for, about me confusing my neighbor's name. Every lie was delivered with such earnest concern that I could almost believe it myself, if I didn't know how the human brain worked. Bridge failures don't happen out of nowhere. There's always stress. There are always hairline fractures. I'd seen both in Ethan and Brooke for years. So, Margaret, Dr. Halperin said near the end of dinner, if Ethan and Brooke helped you with your bills and medical decisions, would that feel like a relief or like a loss of control? I let my fork clatter against my plate, fingers slipping. A little gravy splashed onto the white table runner. Oh dear, I muttered, dabbing at it with my napkin, my hands shaking more than they needed to. I don't know. Tom always handled the big things. Since he died, it's all just numbers. Maybe it would be nice to have help. Ethan shot the doctor a look that said, see? We moved into the living room for dessert. I forgot where the bathroom was. I misplaced my reading glasses and found them on my head. I asked the same question twice about Lila's piano recital. By the time I left, Dr. Halperin had a notebook full of observations he believed were genuine. Ethan walked me to my car, hovering like I might fall. Text me when you get home, he said, buckling my seatbelt for me as if I hadn't been doing it myself since before he was born. Of course, dear, I said. I just hope I remember how this thing works. I patted the dashboard. He smiled sadly, kissed my forehead, and stepped back. He thought he'd won. He thought the old woman in the driver's seat was already half gone. But as I drove back down the hill, hands rock steady now that no one was watching, all I felt was a rising, focused fury. If you think that dinner was bad, wait until you hear what my son tried next, and what I did once I finally saw how far he was willing to go. I barely slept that night, not because I was afraid of being trapped, but because the engineer in me was busy underlining weak points in their plan. At 7:15 the next morning, Ruth called. He filed it, she said without preamble. Halperin's report hit the court docket first thing. He describes you as significantly impaired, unable to manage finances safely, and, my personal favorite, vulnerable to predatory investment schemes. I snorted. The only predatory scheme in my life is currently wearing Ethan's face. There's more, Ruth said grimly. Ethan's emergency petition argues that any delay in granting him temporary guardianship could result in catastrophic loss of your assets. He's requesting an immediate freeze on your accounts and authority to manage all of your property pending a competency hearing. In English, I said. In English, she replied, if the judge signs this as written, your son gets to lock you out of your own money before you can even object. My stomach twisted. The idea of Ethan controlling my checking account was bad enough, but there was something else. Ruth, I said slowly, what exactly did he list under known assets? I could hear her scanning the documents. Primary residence, approximate value, 1 checking account at Mountain Federal, 1 retirement account with the state. He checked unknown for any additional holdings. He had no idea about the trust. That was some comfort. Okay, I said. We stop the freeze first. Then we deal with their lies. I'm already filing an objection, she said. We'll demand a full hearing, a psychiatric evaluation by a neutral party, and financial records. But Maggie, I have to be honest. Judges are wary of being the one who said no if something goes wrong. If Ethan convinced them you're at risk, the court might err on the side of granting a temporary guardianship while we fight. So he'd get a foot in the door, I said. Even if it's temporary, he could start poking around, claiming he needs to inventory everything. Exactly, she said. We were quiet for a moment. Ruth, I said, what about Metro Grid? What about it? She asked, cautious. Have you seen any red flags in their filings? I had asked her to keep a general eye on things when the last merger happened, but I hadn't pressed. Oh, we're making this a full-service call, she muttered, but I heard her fingers on a keyboard. 1 second. Western Ops. Your son is CFO there, right? Yes. More typing. Then. Here's something. A cluster of consulting payments to an outside firm. Summit Vector Advisory, LLC. Does that ring a bell? No, I said. Should it? Not unless you formed a consulting firm with your initials, she said. Because according to this, they've been paid just over $1.8 million in the last 18 months. I gripped the receiver. From Metrogrid? Yes, she said. From Western Ops, specifically. Approved by CFO signature. Summit. Vector, I repeated. SV Ethan's middle name is Victor. Ruth let out a long, low whistle. Maggie, I really hope this is some legitimate outside advisory we just haven't heard of yet. But on its face, it looks like your son created a shell company, invoiced Metro Grid for bogus consulting, and paid himself. And now, I finished for her. He needs to plug the hole before someone like me notices. I could see it so clearly, I almost laughed. Ethan, standing on a bridge he'd quietly hollowed out, realized I was the inspector who could shut down the whole highway. He thinks I'm poor, I said. He thinks the only way to cover his theft is to get control of my little nest egg and liquidate everything before anyone realizes what he did. And he thinks you're too confused to know what's happening, Ruth added softly. My anger sharpened into something precise and cold. Ruth, I said, I want 2 things. First, we fight the guardianship. File everything you need to. Second, we need a forensic audit of Western Ops with a focus on Summit Vector Advisory. She hesitated. We'd need a directive from the majority shareholder for that, Maggie. The board won't order one without serious. I am the majority shareholder, I said. Or more accurately, the Coal Horizons Trust is. and as its beneficiary, I can instruct the trustee. Silence. Ruth? I prompted. I knew you were comfortable, she said faintly. I didn't know you were that comfortable. This isn't about comfort, I said. This is about structural integrity. My son's been chewing through the foundation of my company. Time to see how big the hole is. She regrouped. I could practically hear her shuffling mental files. All right, I'll schedule a call with the Trust's corporate counsel. We can have auditors in Western Ops within 48 hours, maybe less if we push. Make it less, I said. If Ethan smells an audit coming, he'll try something drastic. I hung up and stared at the refrigerator door. It was covered in kid drawings and a fading photo of Tom in his classroom, chalk on his hand, mid-lecture. He'd always believed Ethan had a good heart under all the ambition. I hope you were right, Tom, I murmured, because I'm about to shove a mirror in his face, and I don't know if either of us is going to like what we see. They didn't wait long. Around noon, I heard tires crunch on my cracked driveway. When I looked through the curtain, Brooke was there, walking toward my front door with a large insulated bag and a leather portfolio tucked under her arm. Her heels looked ridiculous on my uneven path. I opened the door before she could knock. Brooke, I said, feigning surprise. This is a nice surprise. Hi, Margaret, she said, stepping in without waiting to be invited. Her smile was wide, but her eyes had the glassy shine of someone running on pure adrenaline. I brought you some soup. Ethan had to run into the office, but he was so worried about you after last night. We both were. She set the bag on the counter and quickly began unloading containers, chicken noodle by the smell. The portfolio stayed in her hand. That's kind of you, I said. But you didn't have to. It's no trouble, she interrupted too quickly. We care about you, Margaret. A lot. And after seeing how shaken you were, how much you spilled at dinner. She winced, as if at the memory. We couldn't sleep. I kept thinking, what if something happens to her? What if she forgets to turn off the stove? What if she gets scammed on the phone? There it was, the script. She slid into the chair opposite me at my small kitchen table, every movement rehearsed. Then she placed the portfolio in the center like an offering. What's that? I asked, though I already knew. Just some simple paperwork, she said softly. I talked to a lawyer this morning, a friend. I wanted to see what we could do to lighten the load for you. She opened the portfolio and pulled out a stack of documents at least 20 pages thick, clipped neatly. At the top, a cheerful cover sheet read, Durable power of attorney and designation of guardian. My name was all over it. It's just a basic power of attorney, Brooke said, flipping pages with manicured fingers. It lets Ethan handle things if, you get confused. Pay your utility bills, talk to your doctor, that kind of thing. He'd only use it if you really needed help. It's only for your protection. Her pen, sleek and heavy, appeared next to the signature line like a viper. I picked up the first page, letting my hands shake. A power of attorney, I echoed. That sounds serious. It's totally standard, she said quickly. Everybody does it now. It doesn't change anything day to day. It just gives us the ability to step in before something terrible happens. Like you giving your savings to some stranger who calls. Do you think I would do that? I asked in a small voice. She smiled sadly. I think you already almost have, she said. Ethan found some strange charges on your bank statement last week. You don't remember? A lie. I'd balanced my checkbook with mechanical precision Friday night. You know, Ethan, she went on, leaning forward. He's so protective. Last night after you left, he was up until 2 a.m. reading about elder financial abuse. He was sick with worry, Margaret. He loves you so much. Rage flared in my chest, but I pinched it down, letting only fear show on my face. It's a lot of pages, I murmured, flipping through slowly. Dense legal text, mentions of transferring management of all real and personal property, designating Ethan as attorney in fact with full authority. That's just how lawyers write, Brooke said. You don't have to read all that. The only important part is right here at the end. One signature, and you don't have to be scared anymore. I raised my eyes to hers. Who's scared, Brooke? I asked gently. Me or you? Something hard flickered behind her smile. We're all scared, she said. The world is dangerous, but some people are more vulnerable than others. I let out a little laugh that turned into a cough. Well, I said, I suppose I'm one of the vulnerable ones now. Her expression softened, in relief, not compassion. Exactly. So let us help you. Sign this and we can call the bank today, set up safeguards, and make sure no one takes advantage of you. I put the papers down. My fingers brushed the pen, feeling its weight. I should probably have Ruth look at this, I said, just to be safe. She always... Ruth. Brooke's voice sharpened. Why would you need Ruth? She's just going to scare you with worst-case scenarios and charge you for the privilege. We're talking about family, Margaret, about trust. Do you trust our lawyer more than your own son? There it is, I thought. The guilt trip, the reframe. If I wanted to protect myself, I was accusing them of malice. I trust Ethan, I said. But I've never signed anything like this before. Your father... I stopped myself, forcing my voice to crack. Tom always read things for me. I wish he were here. Brooke softened again, calculating. I know, she said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. And Ethan is just trying to be your Tom now, to take care of you. She slid the last page toward me. The signature line stared up like a cliff edge. It's just one signature, Margaret, she said. Then we can have some nice hot soup and not talk about this again. I picked up the pen. I let my hand hover a hair's breadth above the paper, just long enough for the ink to start pooling at the tip. I'll sign, I whispered. Brooke's breath hitched. Tomorrow, I finished. The pen paused. The temperature in the room dropped. Tomorrow? She repeated, voice flat. I want to sleep on it, I said quickly. Read it slowly. Talk to Ruth so I don't bother you with questions. I'll sign tomorrow, I promise. Her mask cracked. The charming daughter-in-law vanished. Something colder stared back. Tomorrow might be too late, she said quietly. What if something happens tonight? What if you wander out looking for Tom? What if you leave the stove on and the house burns down with you in it? What if someone calls and convinces you to give away what little you have left? She leaned closer, voice dropping. Do you have any idea what that would do to Ethan, to the kids, to us? I leaned back, letting my shoulders curl in, making myself smaller. I didn't realize it was that serious, I murmured. It is, she said. Then, forcing a smile back onto her face, she slid the documents into the portfolio with jerky movements. But if you'd rather trust some stranger in a suit than your own family, that's your choice. She stood abruptly, chair scraping. Think about it, she said, grabbing the portfolio and her bag. We'll come back tonight. Ethan will be with me. We expect this to be signed. She left the soup behind like a bribe or an insult. I couldn't tell which. I watched her car pull away, then walked to the sink, opened the container, and poured the soup down the drain. It smelled like salt and manipulation. They were escalating faster than I'd expected. Ethan must have felt the walls closing in. If you're still with me, stay tuned, because the next move I made convinced my son that I'd already given away my entire savings. And that's when things went from greedy to truly dangerous. It's frightening how easy it is to make smart people believe exactly what they want to believe. That afternoon, while the sun cast long lines across my kitchen table, I pulled out my old checkbooks, bank statements, and a box of printer paper I never used. I'd spent a career preparing reports that could withstand government audits. Forging something sloppy enough to look like a scam victim's mess was almost relaxing. First, I called Ruth. "Status?" I asked. "We got the emergency guardianship hearing, pushed to a full review," she said. "The judge wants more information before freezing anything. That buys us time. The forensic audit order went through as well. MetroGrid's board chair just called me. They'll have auditors in Western Ops tomorrow morning." "Good," I said. "Now we need Ethan desperate enough to make mistakes. Can you do something for me?" "Name it." "Have the bank flag my account for unusual activity," I said. "Enough that if Ethan calls them fishing for information, they'll say something vague about large online transfers and potential fraud. Nothing that actually touches my real money, just enough smoke." She was quiet for a moment. "You're playing with fire," she said. "I designed fire exits for a living," I replied. "I know where all the doors are." After we hung up, I got to work. I created a fake online statement showing my modest checking account, about $200,000 from my pension savings and Tom's small insurance payout, drained in a series of increasing transfers over the last week. Each transaction referenced the same payee, Sunridge Equity Partners. I chose the name carefully: generic, vague, believable. Next, I wrote myself a note in shaky handwriting on a yellow sticky pad. "Call Sunridge about guaranteed 20% returns. Ask about a bonus for referring Ethan? M." I stuck it to my refrigerator. Then I waited. Almost exactly an hour after Brooke left, my phone rang. "Ethan." "Mom?" he said, not even waiting for me to say hello. "Did someone from Mountain Federal call you today?" I made my voice breathless. "Oh, Ethan, thank goodness. I was just about to call you. There was a man on the phone who said he was from the bank's fraud department. Asked if I'd made some big investment. I got so confused." "Investment?" He sounded like someone had just grabbed his throat. "What investment?" "I don't know," I said. It was all so fast. He said the name, something with Ridge in it. Sunview? Sunbrook? Sunridge? He snapped. "Yes," I said. "Yes, that's it. Sunridge. Such a nice young man. He said he could double what little I had in 6 months. He sounded so confident." There was a sharp intake of breath. "Mom, how much did you give him?" I don't remember," I whispered. "I tried to log into my account after he hung up, but I couldn't make sense of it. The numbers, they're all wrong. I think... Oh, Ethan, I'm so sorry. I think it's gone." "What's gone?" he demanded. "How much?" "The savings," I said. "The money from your father's insurance, the pension leftovers, the CD I cashed out last year, all of it. The bank said I'd been making unusual transfers, but I don't remember doing that." There was utter silence. I could hear his breathing, shallow and fast. "Mom," he said finally, voice thin. "You're sure?" "I'm so stupid," I wailed, letting the sound crack. "You were right. I shouldn't be handling this alone. I just wanted to be useful. I wanted to leave you something when I'm gone. Now I've ruined everything." He exhaled, a long, shuddering sound. "Stay where you are," he said. "Don't call anyone. Don't talk to anyone. Brooke and I are coming over." He hung up. I put the phone down and smoothed the fake statement on the table, right next to the yellow sticky note. Then I sat in my old armchair and waited. They arrived in under 15 minutes. They didn't knock. The key I'd given them for emergencies turned in the lock, and they came in like a storm. "Mom!" Ethan called, voice strained. "Where are you?" "In here," I called back, making my voice small. They found me at the table, my bank statement spread out, hands pressed to my temples. "Oh my God," Brooke whispered, snatching up the papers. Her eyes streaked across the page, her face draining of color. "Ethan." "I see it," he said hoarsely, taking the statement from her. His jaw clenched so hard I saw the muscles knot. 212,000, he muttered. "Gone. In 5 days. To the same Jesus." "I thought," he said. I stammered. "He said it was guaranteed. He said he specialized in retirees. He sounded so trustworthy, Ethan. I thought I was doing something smart for once in my life." "You did this without talking to me?" he said quietly. The anger in his eyes wasn't about my imaginary loss. It was about his very real plan evaporating. "I didn't want to bother you," I said. "You're so busy. You work so hard. I thought maybe if I grew it a little, I could pay for the kids' college. Surprise you." Brooke made a strangled noise. "College," she repeated. "College. You just flushed an entire college fund down the toilet." Ethan slammed his fist on the table. The fake statement jumped. "This is exactly what we were trying to prevent," he said through gritted teeth. "This is why we needed that paperwork signed." "I told you we should have pushed harder," Brooke added. "But no, we had to be sensitive. Look where that got us." I flinched, letting tears well up. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry." Ethan stared at me for a long time. Then something in his face shifted, from anger to calculation. It was like watching someone realize the bridge they're standing on is already gone, and the only question left is whether they can drag someone down with them. "Mom," he said slowly, "do you remember the name again?" "Sunridge." "What?" "Sunridge Equity Partners," I said, reading it off the page as if it had just come back to me. Brooke's knees buckled. She grabbed the back of a chair. "Ethan," she whispered, wasn't there the news?" His eyes closed, just for a second. When he opened them, they were full of pure, naked terror. "It was a Ponzi scheme," he said. "They arrested the founders last week. It was all over the financial news. I didn't think—" He couldn't finish. I covered my mouth with my hands. "Gone?" I whispered. "All of it?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence was enough. What he didn't know: Sunridge Equity Partners was a real scam that had made headlines last week. I'd read about it over my morning coffee and filed the name away, the way I always did with structural failures and disasters. Now, my son thought his confused, helpless mother had poured her entire small fortune into that black hole. His last patch for his crime at Metro Grid had just vanished. For a moment, no one spoke. Brooke sank into a chair, clutching her head. Ethan stood rigid, fists clenched, staring at the fake statement like he could will the numbers back into reality. Then he laughed. It wasn't a joyful sound. It was short, sharp, and a little hysterical. "This is unreal," he said. Absolutely unreal. Do you have any idea what you've done? I told you, Brooke snapped at him. We should have forced the guardianship sooner. But no, you wanted to ease her into it. What was I supposed to do? He shot back. Drag her to court in handcuffs? I'm right here, I said softly. You don't have to talk like I'm not. Brooke rounded on me. You might as well not be, she shouted. Do you have any idea what this means? The auditors at your company? She stopped herself, biting her lip. I filed that slip away for later. The auditors at Ethan's job, she amended. They're going to see missing money, and we were counting on your savings to cover it if we had to. You didn't just ruin yourself, Margaret. You ruined us. Ethan took a slow breath, then another. When he finally spoke, his voice was eerily calm. It doesn't matter, he said. Brooke gaped at him. Doesn't matter? He looked at her, then at me. His eyes were flat. The money's gone. There's nothing we can do about that now, but there is still one asset left. He walked over to the little built-in cabinet where I kept my important papers, tax files, insurance documents, and my will. He rifled through them like he'd done it a dozen times in his head. Ethan, I said, my voice shaking for real now. Those are my private... Here, he said, pulling out a folder. He flipped it open and smiled, a cold, brittle thing. I knew it. He held up a document, my life insurance policy, a modest one I'd kept up after Tom died. Coverage, $250,000. Beneficiary, Ethan Cole. See, he said to Brooke. She didn't lose everything. Brooke stared at the paper. Then she looked at me. You have got to be kidding, she whispered. Do you have any idea how this looks? You blow your savings on a fake investment, but you keep this? Did you ever think maybe we needed protecting too? I intended that money for after I'm gone, I said weakly. For you and the kids. Not now. Ethan folded the policy and tapped it against his palm thoughtfully. When he looked at me again, I felt a chill run down my spine. Mom, he said, do you have any idea how many accidents happen in houses like this? Outdated wiring, old furnaces, slippery bathtubs, broken steps. He glanced toward the basement door, where the wooden stairs led down to my workshop. The railing was loose. I'd been meaning to fix it. Ethan, Brooke said quietly, catching his eye. Don't. He held her gaze. You wanted to protect our future, he said. I'm thinking about it. I stood up suddenly, the chair scraping back. You are not talking about what I think you're talking about. Sit down, Mom, he said. No, I said. This is insane. You're talking about killing me for an insurance payout. Brooke flinched at the word, but Ethan didn't. Don't be dramatic, he said. I'm just saying the world is a dangerous place, and judges are busy. Guardianship hearings take time. Old women fall, houses burn, that's life. Get out, I whispered. Both of you, get out of my house. He smiled, small and cruel. Not just yet, he said. We'll be back tonight with that power of attorney. You're going to sign it, then we'll decide what's best, for everyone. They left without another word, the fake bank statement still on the table, the insurance policy in Ethan's hand. When the door closed, my legs gave out. I sat on the floor and pressed my back to the cabinet, my heart pounding. For the first time, I wasn't acting when I shook. There is a special kind of grief in realizing that the child you raised is capable of weighing your life on a scale against their mistakes. It took me a long time to stand up. When I finally did, I walked straight to my workshop. It smelled like sawdust and machine oil, old comforts. I sat at my bench and stared at the tools Tom and I had used for decades. If Ethan was willing to risk my life, then this was no longer about a legal fight or a corporate audit. This was about survival. My phone buzzed on the bench. It was Ruth. "Maggie," she said, "the auditors are in Western Ops. They've already found payments to Summit Vector. It's bad." "How bad?" I asked. "North of 1.8 million, she said. "Straight into Ethan's shell company and then offshore. The board chair is furious. They're scheduling an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. at Metrogrid headquarters." "Good," I said, an idea forming. "Make sure I'm on the invite." "You?" she said. "Maggie, that room is going to be hostile enough with your son facing an audit. Walking in there as his accuser is—" "I won't be walking in as his accuser," I interrupted. "I'll be walking in as what I've always been, the person who owns the room." A beat of silence. "You want to reveal yourself," Ruth said slowly. "To the board. To Ethan." "I want to end this," I said. "I want Ethan to understand exactly who he tried to steal from. And I want witnesses when his house of cards collapses." "You're sure?" she said. I looked around my workshop, at the projects Tom never finished, at the life we built that Ethan had reduced to quaint. "I'm sure," I said. "Draft whatever we need so my voting rights are officially in my name by tomorrow morning. And Ruth?" "Yes?" "Tell the auditors not to stop with Summit Vector. I want every questionable expense on his watch documented before I walk into that room." "Understood," she said. "Maggie." "Yes?" "Be careful tonight." "I always am," I said. "Structural integrity first. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you raised, you'll want to hear what happened when I stepped into that boardroom. And what it cost my son when he finally realized the confused old woman he'd underestimated was the one person he could never afford to cross. I didn't sleep that night either. But this time, my thoughts weren't circling in fear. They were aligning. I took the battery out of my smoke detector, then put it back. I wedged a chair under the doorknob. I left the basement light on and an old level on the top step, so I'd hear it if anyone opened the door. They didn't come back that night. Maybe Ethan decided murder was a step too far, for now. Maybe he was too busy trying to plug holes in two sinking ships at once. At 7 a.m., a courier brought a thick envelope from the Coal Horizons Trust. Inside was a notarized document transferring proxy voting authority to me personally. I signed where Ruth had flagged, my hand steady. At 8:30, I stood in front of my closet. My usual clothes looked small and tired. On the back hanger was a garment bag I hadn't opened in years. Inside, a dark green suit I'd bought when I was promoted to project lead on my first big highway expansion. It had seen city council meetings, environmental hearings, and my husband's funeral. I put it on. It was a little loose, but it still fit well enough. Metrogrid headquarters in downtown Denver was all glass and steel, the kind of building Ethan loved. Clean lines, impressive lobby, security guards in tailored uniforms. "I'm here for the emergency Western Ops Board session," I told the receptionist. "Name?" she asked. "Margaret Cole." She glanced at her screen, then did a double take. Her posture straightened. "Of course, Miss Cole," she said. "They're expecting you." She handed me a visitor badge with a red stripe. Board access. On the 27th floor, outside the boardroom, Ruth waited with a slim briefcase. She wore a navy suit and an expression I'd seen her use on opposing counsel. "You look terrifying," she said approvingly. "Good," I replied. Inside, the room was dominated by a long table and a wall of windows facing the mountains. The board was already seated, 6 directors in suits, murmuring to each other. At the head of the table was the chair, a white-haired man named Lawson. At the far side, near a screen showing a frozen PowerPoint slide, stood Ethan. He was mid-sentence when the door opened. Which is why, despite the unfortunate appearance of impropriety, these consulting payments were entirely above board, he was saying. Summit Vector provided critical. He stopped when he saw me. For a second, his face went completely blank. Then color flooded in. Anger, confusion, and fear. "Mom?" he blurted. "What are you doing here?" Every head turned. "Good morning," I said calmly, walking to the empty seat near Lawson. "Please don't let me interrupt. It sounds like you were explaining something important." Lawson cleared his throat. "Mr. Cole, you neglected to mention your mother would be attending." "Because she shouldn't be," Ethan snapped, cutting his eyes at me. She doesn't understand these matters. She's had some cognitive issues. I'm in the process of having me declared incompetent," I finished for him pleasantly. "Yes, I read the petition. Very creative." A murmur ran around the table. Lawson looked between us. "Is that true?" he asked Ethan. "You're trying to place your mother under guardianship?" "It's a personal matter," Ethan said quickly. "She's not well, and I'm just trying to protect my assets," I said. "Because you've been siphoning company funds into a shell corporation for the last year and a half, and you were counting on my modest savings to fill the gap when the auditors got too close." Ethan's jaw dropped. "Maggie," Ruth said quietly at my elbow. "Easy. Let them ask." Lawson frowned. "Ms. Cole, I'm not sure how familiar you are with this company's structure, but—" "I'm intimately familiar," I said. "I helped design the algorithms your entire traffic optimization network is built on, and through the Cole Horizons Trust, I own 52% of Metro Grid Technologies." There was a beat of stunned silence. Lawson blinked. "You... what?" I slid the trust document onto the table, followed by the proxy transfer. Ruth pushed them toward him. "As of this morning," Ruth said, "Ms. Cole holds direct voting authority on all 52%. One of the directors let out a low whistle. Another sat back, eyes wide. Ethan laughed again, that same brittle, disbelieving sound he'd made at my kitchen table. "No," he said. "No, that's ridiculous. MetroGrid's majority shareholder is an institutional trust. I've seen the filings. Horizon Capital Partners, Delaware." "The Cole Horizons Trust," I corrected. "We kept the Horizons." It sounded hopeful. "And we chose Delaware because tax law is friendlier there. Not because we wanted to be mysterious." He stared at me like I'd told him I was the Queen of England. "You lied to me," he whispered. "No," I said. "I didn't volunteer information. There's a difference. You assumed I was poor. You assumed whoever owned the company was some faceless investor on the East Coast. You never asked. You never wanted to know." Lawson looked at Ruth. "Is this legal?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "Completely. The trust has been properly disclosed in all filings. The only change today is that, for the first time, the beneficiary is exercising her right to vote those shares personally instead of through a proxy." "So," I said, folding my hands on the table, "let's talk about Summit Vector Advisory." The auditor's report landed in front of Ethan with a heavy thump. He flinched. "Over the last 18 months," I continued, "Western Ops paid Summit Vector approximately $1.8 million for consulting services. The company has no employees. It shares a mailing address with a UPS store. Its only bank account is in the Cayman Islands. The signer?" I nodded toward Ethan. "You." He licked his lips. Those payments were approved by the previous board, he said. We needed agile outside expertise. Save it, one of the directors, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes, cut in. We've seen the invoices. They're boilerplate nonsense. Ethan looked at her, betrayed. Sarah, you know me. I've worked with you for 6 years. And for most of that time I was impressed, she said coolly. Then the numbers stopped making sense. I chalked it up to aggressive growth. That was my mistake. Lawson cleared his throat. Mr. Cole, he said, formal now. We convened this meeting because auditors flagged a pattern that could expose the company to criminal liability. Do you have anything to say that might legitimately explain, these payments? I was going to propose a solution, Ethan said, shifting into sales mode out of pure habit. A short-term asset liquidation to cover the exposure gives us time to renegotiate our credit lines. We have underutilized properties. No, I said. He looked at me, incredulous. No? I will not allow you to sell off parts of the company I built just so you can patch over money you stole, I said. This isn't about optics or short-term liquidity. This is about integrity and law. Ethan's composure cracked. You're doing this to me? He spat. Your own son? I'm doing this to protect thousands of employees and millions of drivers, I said calmly. And yes, to hold you accountable, not as your mother, as the person you defrauded. Lawson sighed. I think we've heard enough, he said. Ms. Cole? I stood. My knees twinged, but I ignored them. As majority shareholder, I said, I move that Ethan Cole be removed as CFO of Western Operations effective immediately, for cause based on the findings in the auditor's report. Sarah raised her hand. Seconded. All in favor? Lawson asked. Hands went up around the table. Ethan stared as his professional life crumbled in real time. Opposed? Lawson added out of habit. No one spoke. The motion carries, he said. Ethan's mouth opened and closed. You can't, he said. You can't just erase everything I've done. You did that yourself, I said. Every time you signed your name on a bogus invoice. Every time you wired company money to your shell. Every time you looked at me and saw a walking bank account instead of your mother. His eyes flashed. You think you're so righteous? He said. You sat in your little house and watched me struggle and said nothing. You let me drown in debt while you sat on a fortune. What kind of mother does that? A mother who wanted her son to become his own man, I said quietly. Not a parasite. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. Lawson cleared his throat again. The audit will be forwarded to the district attorney's office, he said. I don't think we have a choice. This is too big to handle internally. Ethan went still. The DA? He repeated. Yes, Sarah said. There are laws, Ethan. You didn't just betray this company. You broke statutes, wire fraud, embezzlement, securities violations. They investigate those. He looked back at me. You're going to send me to prison, he said. It wasn't a question. I'm going to tell the truth, I replied. What happens after that is out of my hands. 2 security officers appeared at the door, as if on cue. They weren't there to drag him away. That would come later, if the DA decided to arrest him. For now, they stood as a silent reminder of reality. You should go home, Ethan, Lawson said gently. Get a lawyer. We'll be in touch. Ethan stared at me for a long moment, then at Ruth, then at the documents on the table, each one proof that his carefully drawn map of our lives had been built on a false premise. That guardianship petition, he said finally, voice low. You're going to fight it?" "Yes," I said. "You'll win," he said. "I will," I agreed. He laughed one last time. It sounded broken. "Congratulations," he said. "You've protected your bridges, but you burned the only one that mattered. That was your match," I said softly. He walked past me, shoulders hunched, and left the room. The board moved on to next steps: interim CFOs, damage control, and statements to the press if it came to that. I stayed long enough to cast my votes, then excused myself. In the elevator down to the lobby, my hands finally started shaking for real. I had just destroyed my son's career. I had also, in a very real sense, saved a company and everything it supported. Both of those things were true at the same time. The rest unfolded the way these things usually do, once someone strong enough stops pretending everything is fine. The district attorney's office opened an investigation. They subpoenaed bank records and traced the money from MetroGrid to Summit Vector to an offshore account with Ethan's name attached. Dr. Halperin's report became evidence, not of my incompetence, but of a coordinated attempt to seize control of my assets under false pretenses. The DA added potential elder financial exploitation to the list of concerns. The emergency guardianship petition never made it to a full hearing. Ruth walked into court with the trust documents, the audit, and a letter from my primary care doctor describing my cognitive health as excellent for her age. The judge read through Ethan's petition and noted the timing, the conflicts of interest, and the active criminal investigation. "Ms. Cole," he said from the bench, "you do not appear to be the one in need of protection here." The petition was dismissed with prejudice. Ethan lost any chance of trying again under the same pretenses. Brooke's carefully curated life began to fray. Endorsement deals dried up once gossip about that finance scandal started swirling, even before official charges. Friends stopped answering calls. The invitations slowed, then stopped. Ethan was eventually indicted. His lawyers negotiated and argued that he'd fallen under pressure and that he'd intended to pay it all back. In the end, he accepted a plea deal: several years in a minimum security facility, substantial restitution, and a lifetime ban from serving as a corporate officer. On the day of his sentencing, I sat in the back of the courtroom. He didn't look back at me, but I watched the set of his shoulders. They were narrower than I remembered. He looked smaller in a cheap suit than he ever had in his bespoke ones. Afterward, in a quiet hallway, Brooke approached me. Her makeup was gone. Her face was lined with stress. "You must be happy," she said bitterly. "You won." I shook my head. "No one wins here," I said. "We all lost something." "You could have stopped this," she said. "You could have just helped. Give us money. Saved us." "No," I said gently. "I could have given you money. That would not have saved you." She scoffed and walked away. Weeks later, Ethan requested a visit. I didn't say yes right away. I sat with the request, with my anger and my grief and the memory of a little boy who used to fall asleep on my chest. Eventually, I went. The prison visiting room was not as dramatic as TV makes it seem. Plastic chairs, vending machines, a faint smell of disinfectant. Ethan sat on the other side of the table in a beige jumpsuit that did him no favors. For a moment, we just looked at each other. "You look older," he said finally. "So do you," I replied. He huffed a humorless laugh. "I guess that happens when your mother ruins your life." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that what you really think?" He stared at the tabletop, tracing a line in the fake wood grain. "I think I ruined my own life," he said eventually. I also think you watched me walk toward a cliff for years and never shouted loud enough. I did, I said. You just called it nagging and tuned me out. He swallowed. I wasn't always like this, he said quietly. I didn't grow up wanting to steal, somewhere along the way, wanting more turned into needing more. The house, the car, the vacations, the private school. It all felt normal. Everyone around us was doing it. And then the numbers stopped adding up. And I thought, just this once, I'll fix it before anyone notices. That's how bridges fail, I said softly. Not all at once. Tiny cracks, small compromises. You tell yourself, just this once. He looked up, eyes wet. I hated that you were content, he said. It made me feel like a failure, like I wasn't doing enough, like I was already behind. I thought if I built a big enough life, maybe I'd stop feeling like that kid in the thrift store clothes. My job, I said, was to love you enough that you knew you were never behind, not in anything that mattered. You did, he said. I just didn't believe you. We sat in silence. Did you know? He asked eventually. From the start, about Metrogrid, about the trust. Yes, I said. I knew. And you just let me run around, pretending I was so important, not knowing you were the one who could have fired me any time. I wanted you to succeed on your own merits, I said. Not because you were the boss's son. You were good at your job once. You earned a lot of what you had. Then you decided that wasn't enough. He wiped his face roughly with the heel of his hand. Is there anything left? He asked. Of us? The question cut deeper than anything else he'd said. There's always something left, I replied. But it won't ever be what it was. Trust is like a bridge, Ethan. You can repair it, but the scars are always there. Some load limits change forever. So that's a no, he said. It's a not now, I said. You're going to serve your time. You're going to pay back what you stole. You're going to sit in here and think about the fact that you were willing to sign away your mother's mind for money, and for a moment, considered taking her life for an insurance payout. He flinched. If, after all that, I continued, you still want to know me, not my money, not my shares, but me, then maybe we can talk. But I won't carry more weight than the bridge can handle. A guard announced the end of visiting hours. As I stood to leave, he said, Mom? Yes? I'm sorry, he said. For what it's worth, I really am. I nodded. For what it's worth, I said, I know. Outside, the sky was huge and bright. I drove my old Subaru back to my small house, past highways my work had helped design. Cars flowed smoothly over bridges most drivers never thought about. At home, I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table. The fake bank statement was gone, shredded the day after the guardianship petition was dismissed. The life insurance policy was back in the cabinet, but with no beneficiary listed for now. I would decide what to do with it later. The Coal Horizons Trust remained untouched. I instructed Metrogrid to strengthen its internal controls, to create mentorship programs for employees from modest backgrounds, and to invest in safer infrastructure in forgotten neighborhoods like mine. I didn't tell Ethan any of that. Not because I wanted to punish him, but because his relationship with me, if it ever recovered, had to be separate from his relationship with my money. This story isn't satisfying in the way some people want. There's no neat bow, no perfect redemption. My son went to prison, my heart broke. I protected what needed protecting. But there is justice. There is closure. And there is a lesson I hope someone out there hears before it's too late. Do not confuse humility with weakness. Do not mistake quiet lives for empty ones. And never ever assume that the person you're trying to take advantage of doesn't have more power than you can see. If you were in my place, if your own child tried to declare you incompetent just to get your money, would you have done what I did? Would you press charges, or would you protect them? Tell me in the comments. I really do read them. And if this story hit a nerve, please like the video, share it with someone who needs a reminder to stand up for themselves, and subscribe for more stories about justice, boundaries, and what happens when people underestimate the wrong person.